Hey everyone, it's Chris Carter here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. We've got Jenna Harner on today. I want to talk about, do the Steelers still need to get a wide receiver too? After training camp's over, we got a chance to look at their options. We'll talk about that. We'll also talk about which training camp battles shifted the most throughout camp and get you ready for today's joint practice between the Steelers and the Buccaneers. It's the Locked On Steelers podcast. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you a daily dose of all things on the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find the show on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this YouTube channel to get all of your daily Monday through Friday episodes, as well as our bonus content. We thank you for making us your first listen every day because we're your team every day. As I said before, we're joined by the amazing Jenna Harner. She's back from Channel 11 WPXI. Jenna, we are finally done with training camp. No more standing and sweating in the sun for 4 hours. And just being, I have so much, I think my body has just soaked up so much SPF 50 because of all the sunscreen. It's ridiculous, but I'm glad to be back in Pittsburgh.
I think this might be like the tannest my shoulders have ever been after a summer, strictly just because of how much we've been outside in that heat. And that was a big, obviously, point for Mike Tomlin. He wanted to return practices to the afternoon so the players could really soak it all in, take in that heat, and we did that too. And I'm very happy that we're going to go back to a little bit of normalcy where we're just going down to the south side and not all the way out to Latrobe. But shout outs to Latrobe because camp is always phenomenal out there.
It is. Camp is always great. We get a chance to meet a lot of the fans out there. Shout out to all the fans that said hello throughout training camp. Appreciate every one of y'all. But Jenna, one of the things that we talked about a lot leading up into camp, right, was the Steelers, the wide receiver position. They didn't have a bona fide wide receiver too. A lot of people were saying, oh, they should go get Terry McLaurin. They should go get this guy. They should go get that guy. They should sign this guy. And so, as I said, I think the Steelers are going to go into training camp and just see what they have, which is exactly what they did. Calvin Austin played for about 2 weeks and then was hurt for the last two weeks or so of training camp. Roman Wilson came out very quiet to start training camp, wasn't making a lot of plays. And then I'd say the last 2 weeks, he really stepped up, found his rhythm with Aaron Rodgers, and we saw him making plays. We also saw Jonnu Smith making plays in the Steelers offense. Even though he's a tight end, he kind of was brought in to be one of those other guys that could take away attention from DK Metcalf. But Jenna, after all this, do you look at this and still think the Steelers are going to go get a wide receiver too, or has training camp changed your opinion on that situation?
I really think it could go either way, and I wouldn't be surprised with either. It wouldn't surprise me if the Steelers say, hey, we're going to stand pat. We like the guys that we have in this room. We like the development we've seen from Roman Wilson up to this point. We know that we're going to get Calvin Austin back. Mike Tomlin, after his end of the training camp press conference or just, media availability yesterday when we talked, or 2 days ago when we talked with him, he said Austin's still day-to-day. So it doesn't seem like it's anything. They don't anticipate Calvin Austin getting worked back in very shortly. They know his body of work, of course. And obviously you have Jonnu Smith, Pat Freiermuth, you have these pass catching tight ends that are going to be utilized for their ability in that area. But at the same time, I could also see the Steelers say, hey, we're going to add to this room here. We want to go out and get somebody else. And Gabe Davis is not the answer. I don't know how many more times I have to say that, but
I agree.
I can see them kind of getting a guy who would probably be a wide receiver 3, maybe on another team, to kind of just compete in that role where, okay, this is going to be a guy competing against Roman Wilson, competing against Calvin Austin for that spot. But truly, it wouldn't surprise me either way. I also, you and I were talking before we started recording, it's very interesting when we hear Aaron Rodgers talk, because when he mentions a player, I think he looks to single some people out in a very intentional way. And I think he did that with Roman Wilson 2 weeks ago, not this week, the last time we talked to him, which was, I believe, 2 weeks ago. The timing, what day is it? What time? I don't even know at this point. But he mentioned talking about Roman Wilson, the ability that the young receiver has, but also the fact that he needs to trust himself a little more. And he wants to see Roman Wilson take those steps and really trust in his game because his body of work, according to Rodgers, is there. And I think that's what we've seen over the last little bit. And I think, it's very intentional from Rodgers in the way he's speaking to Roman Wilson. And I do think there is the potential for him to take a step forward. I don't necessarily, just based on what we've seen, think it's going to come out and be like, oh my goodness, where on earth did this guy come from? But right. I do think he made some really solid plays over the last handful of practices where you're like, okay, the potential is here. He has to build on that. He has to be consistent in that way.
No, I'm right with you on Roman Wilson. I think he's definitely stepped up, and he made this a different question. Now, I think part of this also depends on how healthy is Calvin Austin. Is he dealing with, is his injury something that's going to sideline him going into the regular season? And that could change maybe some perspectives there. But I think the problem that the Steelers offense is really going to run into with this wide receiver 2 question is if you go get somebody that you want to feature prominently in your offense, like let's say they trade for a big name wide receiver, they sign Amari Cooper, and that guy's going to be important to the offense. Who do you kind of bump out the rotation? Because I think you're expecting Calvin Austin and Roman Wilson to have bigger roles. You want to see what Roman Wilson has this year as his second year in the NFL. But you invested in this tight end room to get them on the field a lot. Like you're paying Pat Freiermuth good money, you're paying Jonnu Smith good money, and Darnell Washington, as I said yesterday, I think he was the beast of the offense in training camp. Like he just. You saw that fade touchdown that he caught in 7 shots. That man is just unstoppable in the red zone, and now he's running better routes, so he's getting open at all parts of the field. If you get a second receiver, you're not going to see a lot more Darnell Washington. You're not going to see Calvin Austin and Roman Wilson as much. And it's like, and I agree that if DK Metcalf goes down, it's a big problem. And I think that's the conundrum they're in right now. Is that I think if everyone's healthy, they can be in a good spot because Aaron Rodgers can use the skill sets that everyone has. But if DK Metcalf goes down, then they lose. They don't have a bona fide number 1 on their roster. And then all of a sudden, it's going to make it that much harder for everyone else. So it's kind of a tricky situation that Omar Khan has to deal with here.
And we know, obviously, Arthur Smith loves the utilization of tight ends and just the way he can, add personnel where you're having 2, 3, 4, even 4 on the field at the same time, which that was ridiculous.
Pretty wild.
But I'm here for it. Bring it on. In tempered situations. But I feel like there is this constant talk about, we see Darnell Washington at training camp and we see him get utilized in the red zone and then it doesn't translate to the season. And that I don't remember if I was talking with you or one of the other reporters, just because we've had so many conversations the last couple of weeks, but when he is in the red zone, he makes plays. He talks about his pass catching ability. He talks about his hands. Let him do it in the regular season. I feel like it's a cheat code against, what was it? He was against Darius Slay 2 days ago in 7 shots.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of those, you're like, okay, there, Darnell's out wide. There it goes. And it works. And it worked in the preseason game. And, again, you have to build on these types of things. And this is something that they're probably not going to utilize every time. But I do think this is one of those benefits to this offense where it says, hey, you create a perfect mismatch, capitalize on it.
I think what's happening right now is the Steelers are going to see how serious Calvin Austin is injured. Yeah. And if he's going to miss time for the regular season, then they make a move. But if not, I think they're going to try to just keep their eyes peeled for if a move that they really like that works for them completely develops, but they're not going to force something. Like they're not going to go into and say, all right, we got to trade for a big name and just bring him into the roster and give up draft picks or give up this. I think they're going to wait and see, like, okay, can we get this guy for a depth player? Can we get this guy over here that if like say Romeo Doubs is injured right now, so he for the Packers, and the whole Packers wide receiver room is injured, so that's actually a problem. But I look at you like they have depth right now in several spots in the roster, but and whereas you like having that depth, if you could trade Cole Holcomb and a 2027 4th round pick for a wide receiver 2 that wouldn't be dominant but would be a good playmaker, that's a good, interesting question. Do you want that, or do you want your linebacker depth? And I think that's a tough question because linebacker depth has killed this team at times, but that's why I think it's not going to be something that they force. I think Omar Khan's going to be patient. He's going to wait around. And if the deal doesn't come around, He's just going to sit. He's going to sit pat. He's like, hey, we've added a whole lot to this roster. We're going to rock out with that and see how it goes.
Yeah, that's exactly my feel on the situation. You're right. With the Calvin Austin injury, again, Mike Tomlin's telling us this day to day, but what is it really? What is it actually? What's the realistic timeline for when he gets back? If it's something that is as short term as they're leading on to me, you don't need to add anything to this group unless, of course, there is another big injury or something else kind of ripple effect happens. But it truly isn't going to surprise me either way. But I think the front office also, I feel like, wants to feel confident in the group that they have.
I agree.
They want to, because again, you spent the draft capital on Roman Wilson. So you want to see that return on investment there. You brought in Jonnu Smith, who's shown his playmaking ability. You're, developing Darnell Washington, who seems as healthy as he's been since he's been here with this team. So to me, again, it wouldn't surprise me, but I feel like the front office does want to go in saying, no, we're really confident with the group here, and we have faith that they're going to be able to execute what we want out of this offense this season.
Absolutely. Wide receiver was one position we looked at closely, but we also looked at a few others and wanted to talk about some of those camp battles that we've been observing. We'll talk about how those shifted and which shifted the most throughout training camp. Next here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm your host, Chris Carter. Stick with us. We will be right back. But first, remind you, this show is brought to you by Yahoo Fantasy. It's the best time of the year as NFL kickoff is almost here, and that means fantasy football season is back in full swing. This year, Yahoo Fantasy is turning things up with a fantasy football experience like never before. It's all going down on Yahoo Fantasy. This year, me and Locked On Steelers listeners are playing on Yahoo Fantasy, and you should too. Whether you're a first-timer or a veteran making your millionth league, you've got to use Yahoo Fantasy. I've used it for years, and updates that they're rolling out this month are wild in the best way. To celebrate 28 years of fantasy football greatness, Yahoo Fantasy is dropping 28 new fantasy features over 28 days throughout August. To kick it off, they just dropped Yahoo Fantasy Guillotine Leagues. These are a killer new way to play fantasy football on Yahoo, where each week the lowest scoring team gets eliminated until there's one team left standing in the end. With the season around the corner, now's the time to get your league together and give this new mode a try. If you're into the classics, you can still play head-to-head private leagues or join a public league. That's yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnNFL. Let's make this fantasy season the best one yet, only at Yahoo Fantasy. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm your host, Chris Carter, here with Jenna Harner of Channel 11 WPXI in Pittsburgh. Jenna, camp battles are always an interesting topic about who's up against each other. I felt like this year there were less bona fide camp battles and a lot of them were more about like, hey, who's going to be the first one off the bench in this situation? Who's going to be the depth guy in this situation? But if I'm looking at what changed the most, it has to be the defensive line, because to me, the starters were set. Once Carl Dunbar said that Derek Harmon was a starter next to Keanu Benton and Cam Hayward on the defensive front, that wasn't the question. But then the question was, who would be the first couple guys off the bench for the defensive line? Would it be Isaiah Loudermilk, who's been in the system for 5 years? Would it be Dan Aquale, the veteran from the Patriots that they brought in? Would it be Yahya Black, the guy they drafted in the 5th round? Logan Leah, a guy who they drafted late in day 3 and is in his second year. They had options. They even brought back Braden Fehoko, who'd been with the team before. And I did not think at the start of training camp it would just be, oh yeah, it's definitely just Yahya Black. And that's what it's become, Jenna. Like, I've been thoroughly impressed by him, and it seems like the Steelers are impressed by him too.
Yeah, the youngster has no doubt just made plays that you've noticed him in. And I think people were excited because it was, okay, this guy's coming in. He's could be a solid depth piece. He's a rookie though. He's still getting his feet under him, kind of figuring things out. He did not look like a rookie to me.
He did not.
He did not look like a rookie to me. And we heard multiple players on the defensive side say that. Keanu Benton had some glowing things to say about him in conversations we had with defensive linemen once we really saw Black's progression throughout camp. I am going to be interested to kind of hear Mike Tomlin's latest update, because on practice on Tuesday, he did have that big wrap on his arm. So kind of something to just really keep an eye on here and see to the extent of what that could be. But he was impressive. And I think, again, that's what you want to see. Obviously, too, you don't want to sit here and say, with Cam Hayward's situation. Is he potentially going to miss games? He again alluded to that a couple days ago when he spoke with us for the first time since this Holden news came out. But you do feel very confident with the depth that you have and the fact that Black is a rookie and there's so much more he can continue to progress and so many more steps he can take forward here. But I no doubt was very, very impressed with what we saw from him. And again, he can only go up from here. There's still, he can continue to learn, continue to grow. And that's one of the biggest positives you can sit here and say when this is a team that puts so much emphasis on, hey, we are going to limit the run after what happened to us in the playoff game against the Ravens. That was the big focus for the Steelers this offseason was they're like, hey, we're going to find these guys that can add and, can help us in an area that we struggled in toward the end of the season. We meaning, of course, not me.
I got you.
I have to put that caveat. I'm talking as if I was the Steelers front office. But I think he was no doubt impressive. And I think, again, that's such a big benefit for the Steelers and knowing the value they got for Black in the 5th round.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. The Steelers are looking at this like they got to steal. Like this guy's going to be fresh off the bench, and like I think that's the other cool thing is that you got Derek Harmon playing a lot, and then you got another guy behind him. And Carl Dunbar said it when they drafted, when they drafted both of these guys, and we asked him like, hey, so like, what's the competition going to be like? He's like, you're going to have to go take your food at the dinner table, saying that like. It's that you can't just walk up and say you got a job. Like Isaiah Loudermilk should be looking over his shoulder right now, man, because they've added a lot of pieces and a lot of these young guys are stepping up. So that's a big one. Let's flip to another position, but stay on the defense. I think cornerback has also been an interesting group to see how the camp battles develop. Now, of course, this isn't for the top 3. The top 3 are obviously Jalen Ramsey, Joey Porter, Darius Slay. All those guys fit that. But after that was the big question because we did not know where Brandin Echols was supposed to go. We did not know where Corey Trice was supposed to go. Beanie Bishop's an exclusive slot, but those were 3 guys that were all kind of trying to figure it out. And it really seems like Brandin Echols has won out. Now, granted, Corey Trice has been injured, and unfortunately, this continues to be a trend and might be just the trend with him. Yeah. But Brandin Echols has looked really good, and he's kind of even positioned himself in practice where he can be the first guy off the bench to help in the slot and the first guy off the bench to help on the outside. That's a really good, versatile backup to have.
And how much do the Steelers love versatility in their guys, especially on the defensive side in the secondary where you have a guy like Echols who can kind of fit wherever you need him to in that moment. And look, you're good. Like you said, you're going to see a very, very, very large majority of the time, you're going to see Joey Porter Jr., you're going to see Darius Slay, and you're going to see Jalen Ramsey all on the field just in the way that the Steelers work. I know people talk about like, oh, what happens when they're in base, but they're very, very, what's the word I'm looking for? They're very limited in terms of them being in their base defense. It's not one of the big, they're not in that all the time at all. But I do love just what we've seen from him and what he's put on display. And again, also too, his special teams work has been something that I really think you can kind of do too. That's a thing Mike Tomlin and the rest of the Steelers coaching staff really loves is, okay, we can have this guy who is going to be someone that comes in when one of these top 3 corners needs a break, when you hope not, but if someone gets hurt and you've seen him make big plays where you're like, okay, no, this is a very solid addition. And you and I were talking too, because before we started, but it feels like if the Steelers didn't have these 3 corners that they have, Echols would have been a guy that would have been in the starting lineup regardless. But again, you talk about depth. This is something that you want. This is, it's never a bad thing to be deep at that position.
Exactly. And they want to have the depth there because they're going to use their cornerbacks a lot in this defense to be aggressive, man coverage, zone coverage, flip between the two, try to disguise a whole lot of things. That's what the Steelers are going to be about this season. And like, I think that like on some of those defenses where Levi Wallace was the starter outside, maybe Brandin Echols would have been that guy, or maybe he would have bumped into the slot, in some defenses. But he looks like he fits in. Jalen Ramsey on the pivot, it seems to be so excited and happy with what he's seeing at Steelers training camp about what they're trying to do. I think that's really interesting stuff to see out of them. At the risk of being a bit redundant, I want to go next back to the wide receiver position, because while I think we all kind of knew the top 3 receivers were DK Metcalf, Calvin Austin, and Roman Wilson, but I don't think it was settled who was the 4th and 5th and potentially 6th wide receivers of this roster. And I really think that the guy who cemented himself as the fourth wide receiver is Scotty Miller.
Yeah.
We were talking, you brought him up earlier with how, like, as far as people that Aaron Rodgers singles out, he singled him out recently, and he's kind of like, this guy's doing, the little things right, and he's fast, he's quick, he's catching the balls that are thrown to him. I think Scotty Miller's put himself into the situation where he's going to have a helmet for the season. He's going to be on that 53-man roster, and then it's going to be a question after that. Ben Skoranek, is that the priority, or do they want to keep one of these other guys like Rock Taylor or Lance McCutcheon?
Yeah, and I don't want to sit here and be like, maybe Robert Woods got outplayed out of a job, because
I think he did.
Yeah, I think he did. I realistically think he did, with what we saw from Scotty Miller. And just, again, you never want to see injuries, but with Calvin Austin out, this was an opportunity for Miller to say, hey, look, I'm here. I'm still here. And I think we saw almost that comfortability level between him and Aaron Rodgers, where when Rodgers needed to make a play, a little quick throw, it was to Miller a decent amount of times when he wasn't looking for DK. I feel like there were many plays where like, all right, okay, Rodgers and Scotty Miller. You sit there and you're like, all right, that's a nice solid play. But I mean, that's what Zeke wants to say hello. Zeke is very excited about the Scotty Miller. Yeah. But I again, talking about benefits and what this can be for this team, that's a big benefit. And kudos to Scotty Miller for taking advantage of that opportunity and stepping in, because I do think he is going to be somebody that is going to be on this 53-man roster when it gets announced in a couple weeks.
Absolutely. I agree with you there. I think Robert Woods ran into the conundrum that he was brought in to be the Van Jefferson / Allen Robinson of this group.
Yeah.
But the reason that those guys were brought in was because they were older veterans on the back end of their careers who wouldn't be expensive, and they could try to give insight and be the veteran leader of the room. Whereas they had Deontay Johnson and George Pickens as their top guys, and those guys weren't the best leaders. So they wanted someone that could balance that. Now you have DK Metcalf. You don't need that in your room. And that's not to say that Robert Woods isn't needed, but I just think that they've got better options right now based off of what I've seen at training camp. I'd be surprised if he makes the final 53-man roster, Robert Woods, that is. So a few training camp battles that I do think have shifted there. And I'm sure there's others, for example, I think Peyton Wilson, it didn't shift. He just solidified himself as a linebacker 2 next to Patrick Queen and Cole Holcomb, who practiced very well and was very active all training camp. I think he's a really good option to come off the bench right now for the Steelers defense. There's a lot of good things going for them right now. And I think that this is when you see that competition in camp, that's the stuff that can help you make you a better team.
Yeah. And again, it was so funny because it came in and it felt like there was so much focus on the newness of, okay, what's this offense going to look like, the young addition, but there didn't feel like there was this true, like, oh, this is the battle where these two guys are competing for this starting role. And that was a very interesting dynamic to have throughout this camp.
Mm-hmm. I agree. It's a lot of competitions. And I also say the punter competition's still going on. I still think Cameron Johnson's got the edge, but man, Corliss Waitman, he's making it tough. It's going to be interesting to see if they can get like a return on him if someone loses their punter in preseason and the Steelers are like, oh, we got 2, we can send you one of ours. But certainly a lot of things there. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, the joint practice between the Steelers and Buccaneers is this afternoon at Acrisure Stadium, sort of like a preview for us as reporters who will be there before the preseason game this Saturday. I want to talk about what aspects of that we're most looking forward to, matchups we want to see, all here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm Chris Carter. She's Jenna Harner. Stick with us. Be right back.
Zeke, move now.
Today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever wish managing your money felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending all in one place, so you stop managing your money and actually start building wealth. If you're like me, you probably have a lot of subscriptions in place, a lot of orders online over time that adds up to be a lot of money. Well, with Monarch Money, you can keep a close watch on all that spending in an easy to see, organized, and convenient presentation. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year only at Monarch Money. We're back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm Chris Carter. She's Jenna Harner. And apparently Zeke is trying to take over the podcast. He wants to get his opinion on what to look out for in the Buccaneers.
Zeke was getting very close to laying on the router and modem. And I was like, we can't have
that. Can't have that.
So enjoy our little me asking Zeke to please kindly move, but saying it sternly so he listens to me. The life of a dog parent.
This is a pro Zeke podcast, so we're happy with it. As long as it doesn't take your feet out, we're happy with Zeke being on the show. But let's start looking at this upcoming joint practice. The Buccaneers have a good roster. They're a team that's they've gotten guys on the defensive front, got the offensive line. Now, there will be some guys that probably don't practice. Tristan Wirfs is expected to miss time going up into the regular season, so their top offensive lineman out. That'll be interesting for the defensive line. Chris Godwin suffered that really bad injury last year. He's still recovering from it, so he won't be in the picture. I think linebacker Anthony Walker also probably isn't expected to practice. Maybe Cade Otton, their top tight end. But you're still going to get a lot of really talented guys. And Jenna, that leads me to the group that I'm actually really excited to see go at it in this game, in this joint practice, and eventually in this game if all the starters play. It's the wide receivers of the Bucs versus the corners of the Steelers. You got Mike Evans, a rookie, Emeka Egbuka, who I loved in college, and Jalen McMillan, three talented dudes. That you're throwing out there, and that's who Jalen Ramsey, Joey Porter, and Darius Slay get to go up against. Man, I want to see some fireworks between Jalen Ramsey and Mike Evans. That's going to be fun.
It's going to be a blast. You know there's going to be a little fight brewing. You just know. Joint practice, it always happens. But how big will it get will be the question. I don't think it'll be one that cancels practice, although you truly never know depending on the timing of it. But I mean, Jalen Ramsey talking on the Pivot podcast, like you were saying, kind of really, really excited to be able to have this opportunity. Joey Porter Jr., when we talked with him on Tuesday, licking his chops at just – these guys are so excited to go against somebody that's not their own team. But this is going to be I think this is going to be kind of a measuring stick in a lot of different areas for us to kind of gauge, okay, this is where this team is at. This is something tangible where you can look at and say, all right, the corners, they held up really well against Mike Evans, or, oh, they got burned a little bit and Baker found ways to exploit them. I also really am excited to see the Steelers offensive line go against Tampa's defensive line.
Oh, yeah.
That's going to be another one I have kind of locked in because, again, there's so much focus on the Steelers offensive line, Broderick Jones, Troy Fautanu. How do all the pieces mesh? How do they protect Aaron Rodgers? How does the run game look? How do they create these running lanes? And I think that for me is going to be something I'm really, really paying attention to later this afternoon. Just what did we see in that area? Did they get bullied? I mean, Kalijah Campbell and Vita Vea, it's a lot.
Yeah.
That's a lot, but
Anthony and Vea are a nasty pair. I also realized this is the first time I think that Kalijah Cansey and Servassier Dennis, who's also a linebacker for the Buccaneers, two Pitt guys, are back at Acrisure Stadium where they played their college careers and won an ACC championship for the Pitt Panthers. That's going to be exciting to see. But I'm right with you. That front is nasty. Vita Vea is one of the freakish defensive tackles that's just built who he can move. Kalijah Cansey is quick. He's not a big guy. He's a smaller guy, but he will beat you off the ball if you're not paying attention. That's going to be really interesting to see. How does the O-line deal with those guys? And then Levante David, one of the better linebackers in the NFL. How do they get to those guys? I want to see how this offensive line works against them. We've been seeing how the offensive line picks up the Steelers pass rush, how they've been trying to counter what the Steelers do up front. Now this is our chance to see another talented front go up against them. So now it'll give us a little bit more of observations and notes to go with it, say our barometer of just how far along is this offensive line. I've thought that Broderick Jones, Troy Fautanu, especially those two have looked better and better throughout camp. Now I want to see, can they look better against these guys?
And Troy Fautanu, you and I were joking before, but Troy Fautanu has to just be being like, all right, I don't have to go against TJ Watt today, guys. Everything's good. It's a good day. But I mean, we talk so much about the iron sharpening iron aspect. It's something that guys mention so much. I feel like it kind of gets to be ad nauseum, but it's such a true point where you see a young player going against TJ Watt every single day in practice. What does that translate to when he's going against other teams' defensive lines and protecting against other teams' edge rushers? I do also want to see, I mean, again, we've talked about this so much, but I want to see how the offense operates. Aaron Rodgers, you do expect him to be part of this practice. We don't know. It seems almost like we might not see him at all this preseason. Maybe, I mean, if it's going to be this weekend against Tampa, but it just doesn't, the way he's been talking, the way Mike Tomlin's been talking, to me, it just doesn't entirely feel likely like we'll get to see him in a game situation. So for this setting, it's, hey, how can this offense operate against another team's starters? How do they move the ball, and what creativity do we see against this Tampa defense that's a really solid defense?
I think it's good. The defense is certainly what's going to be interesting to watch there from them. I also think, we talked about the Steelers' offensive line versus their defensive line. The Steelers' defensive line, because Cam Hayward's, with his holding, he's probably not going to be taking part in this. You're going to see Derek Harmon, maybe Yahya Black if he's healthy, Keanu Benton, Isaiah Loudermilk, Logan Lee, Dana Qualley. You're going to see that crew up against an offensive line from the Buccaneers that's full of also recent investments to rebuild their offensive line. If you go back to not this past draft, but 2 drafts ago, their first round pick was Graham Barton, the center out of Duke. He's become a big name for them. The year before that, they picked tackle Cody Mock in the second round. The year before that, they picked another tackle, Luke Gadecki, in the second round. So they've been investing in their offensive line. So this is a chance for a young defensive line to go up against a young offensive line and see how do these two go against each other. Because again, we've been seeing the Steelers' young lines go against each other, and I think it's going to be interesting to see how much we've seen both the offensive line grow, we've seen the defensive line dominate for the majority part, but how do they counteract with other teams that they're just getting to know, and you don't know what plays they're calling, you don't know what the thing, you don't know these guys across the line. That stuff is always fun to me about watching a joint practice.
Yeah, and I had to laugh too when we talked with Broderick Jones on Tuesday, and I asked him, I said, how much are you just looking forward to this joint practice? And I don't know if I've ever seen him smile as big as he did, and he just grinned and he's like, now that's what I'm talking about. Like, these guys are so excited to go against somebody else, to hit somebody other than their own teammates. I think a lot of the guys use like beat up on or bully, other guys that aren't our guys. So I think this is going to be a really, joint practices are always fun because of just the unknown component of it. But yeah, I feel like later this afternoon, we're going to be tweeting and posting and telling a story about some brawl that happened, because it feels inevitable. I will be very pleasantly surprised if there is not some sort of scuffle, kerfuffle, any of that.
Absolutely. These two teams are physical, and I think it's going to cut that when you've got two physical teams going against each other, someone wants to impose their will, the other one doesn't want them to. There's going to be some fights, but we'll be on hand at Acrisure Stadium covering all of that to give you updates there. And then we'll be back here tomorrow with the Locked On Steelers podcast, letting you know what happened in the joint practice. Stay tuned for all of that, but also stay tuned with Jenna, because Jenna does an amazing job. Jenna, thanks for joining us. Let people that can find you, follow you, get more of your work.
Well, thank you as always for having me. It's just a pleasure to be here. You can find me on Twitter at Jenna Harner 11, Instagram, Jenna_Harner, locally in Pittsburgh, WPXI, the NBC affiliate. We got a lot of great stuff coming. Chris and I have Friday Night Football Skylights coming up. So stay tuned for all that as we dive into the fun of football season.
Absolutely. She's Jenna Harner. I'm Chris Carter. Thank you for joining us here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. As always, you can find the show on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoyed it. Subscribe to this YouTube channel to get all of your daily Monday through Friday episodes, as well as our bonus content. And remember, you can read my work in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette by going to post-gazette.com. Find me here in the Locked On Steelers podcast. Back here tomorrow after Steelers joint practice with the Buccaneers and getting you ready for week 2 of preseason football right here on the Locked On Steelers podcast.